Hi, if you or your children are suffering because of your relationship with your ex-partner, because it's stressed or strained, or maybe they're just not a nice person, this show is for you. Welcome to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brook Olson and Charlie Jewett. Enjoy another episode now. Hey everybody, welcome back to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast, episode 1 with Brook Olson and Charlie Jewett. Brooke, we did a really lengthy 000. Some introductory episodes I've seen on other podcasts are, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Like, I would like to help fish lovers raise saltwater fish. Come back next week. But we went deep, didn't we?
Yeah, we did go deep, and I think that is going to be indicative of how everybody needs to begin to look at this and to reach deep into this material and explore it more and more and come back and repeat it so that they can really land this, because these are some of the most important things that they're going to do in their life and the life of their children.
And it's the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast. We talked about this title. You and I said, what's the most effective way to communicate who should be listening or what we're trying to accomplish? This is for someone where there's children involved. It's not that somebody else won't benefit. Anybody can listen. That's fine. But when there are children involved and there's a high conflict relationship, which we talked about probably means one or both parents are struggling in some way with something, emotionally, mentally, even if it's short term, could be long term, could be physical, could be emotional. This is for people that it's not going well. I mean, it's not for the smooth sailing, like everything's perfect, we still have dinners together every Wednesday. You know what I mean? This is for the high conflict relationship where there's kids involved, and whether you like it or not, this conflict is hurting the kids, even if they don't see it, because it's hurting you, and you are with your kids, it's hurting the kids.
Right. And, with the conflict going on, Charlie, it is hurting the kids. I mean, they do see it. They do sense it. It is a part of what is energetically in the field and in their nervous system. I mean, as human beings, and we're going to talk about this over and over and over again as we move through this, but our nervous systems are connected to one another. Our limbic brains are the same brains that horses have, that herd animals have, that predatory animals have, where there's this communication that's going on underneath the verbal. And that exchange has an impact, positive or negative, in either direction. So as we look at this material, to understand that everything that we're doing as parents, every place that we're engaged in the conflict, our children are engaged in the conflict as well. Right. And that is undeniable.
So your message is stop horsing around and quit trying to be heard.
That's a really good one.
Sorry.
I like that.
I couldn't help it. You're going to steal that and put it in your book, aren't you?
No.
Horse brains and herd animals. Well, episode 1, I remember episode 100 from my other podcast, Renovating Retirement. I really struggled. I'm like, oh, it's so special. It's 100. Like, what do we do? And for me, I ended up bailing and couldn't come up with anything special and just did the next topic. But the first episode is really important. And we picked, this is the foundation. This is the cement that's laid under the house, right? We picked the foundation of staying peaceful in what you teach, which is disengage, right?
Those are the 3 rules. Everything comes out of that.
So this is like location, right? In real estate, the 3 rules. And it's the same word repeated over and over again on purpose. There's a reason that you're emphasizing that. Why don't you tell us, what is this? What's the disengagement journey? What do you mean? I mean, you're stuck in this relationship. How are you supposed to disengage?
Well, it's a process. And the redundancy of the words is not the redundancy of the process. I look at this from a model of awareness, acceptance, and approval. And when we start the disengagement journey, the first disengagement it's a white knuckle. It's not easy to do. Biologically, neurophysiologically, we are drawn into engagement. When we are attacked, we want to defend. When somebody says something disparaging about us, we want to rebut it. We want to change their concept of who we are and get them to hear what we want them to hear. And that just isn't going to happen. And we are running against the tide of our own biology. So it's a white knuckle piece. And what we're learning to do in this first level of disengagement is to hack that part of our brain that takes us into fight, flight, and freeze. And it's an awareness piece. Awareness, acceptance, approval. The awareness is I am lit up. The awareness is that my nervous system is activated and I so much want to do something because there's this charge in my body. It doesn't feel good and I want to shake it. And the only way I know how to do that is to dump or to engage. And we know for a fact, if you listeners can think about this for just a moment, that every time that you engage in even a normal conversation with the other parent, it ends up in an argument. It goes sideways. You don't get heard. You don't get your point across, and it ends up in this piece that gets even more activating.
Right.
And if we can understand that, if we can see that, then we can start to back up and go, why do I do this? Why do I do this? Because it only makes things worse. But our propensity, our desire is to get out of this high activation feeling. But when we do it in a way where we engage in the argument and it feels so good when we're done, the natural reuptake is that we go back into activation.
Yep.
We end up back here again. So it is a positive feedback loop with a negative outcome. And that is the awareness piece. We can't continue to do what we've always done. We have to change the patterning. So this is the first stop. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that let me try to encourage the listeners with probably a crude example or analogy, but since we're all parents, if we're co-parenting, we're probably parents, or at least been around kids. Wouldn't it be accurate to say that when we're young, we start not being able to recognize that we need to go to the bathroom, and therefore we're not potty trained and things don't go the way that they do as grown-ups? You learn to recognize that feeling or that sensation, that need, that change, and then we go, oh, I need to go to the bathroom, and you end up, being potty trained or whatever. And I know that's crude and that's kind of very basic, but aren't you saying the same thing, that right now, if you don't even know how to be aware that you're what's the word you used? That you're sort of fired up or you're activated or elevated, right? That you're like triggered, right?
Right.
If you're not even aware of that, you can't do anything different than what you used to do. Okay, kids pee their pants. We text back and fight, right? We immediately respond and freak out and engage. And it is possible. Now, I've seen this in my life, so I can speak from one person's point of view, but you're coming from a totally different perspective, having helped. Are you at thousands? I mean, I would say hundreds, thousands of people to learn this technique or to recognize when that's going on inside your body and go, oh, I know that feeling. That feeling is a stoplight. That doesn't say right back right now. That might be the feeling that says, get out of that text conversation for 24 hours and come back, or get out of it and have a friend read it and talk to them about it. This does not mean now's the time to write and fight, right?
Precisely. And that is the impulse for sure, is to just get right back into it. So as a somatic therapist, as somebody that uses body-based sensation to enter into the process, this is what we're trying to do. And what is that sensation of being activated? And the great thing about this is when we learn this first level of hacking the nervous system, we are opening the portal to choice. We are opening the portal to do something differently that is not reactive. But the way that the brain works is the fight, flight, freeze system. The amygdala is the first piece to come on point. It's the defensive mechanism. And there are sensations that come along with that activation. And we have to get from that to cognitive process, the prefrontal cortex of our brain. And the two do not work together. They are mutually exclusive. And in order to get out of one, we have to get into awareness. We have to be self-aware.
It's either or.
It's either or. It's never both.
Okay.
And if we understand that, then this idea of disengaging and, oh, by the way, there's a fourth rule that goes along with this, and that is don't just sit there, do something.
Oh, you beat me to it, you booger. I was going to bring that up. And I'm so sorry. This may be my favorite thing you've ever said, and you said you didn't originate it, but that just means you're super humble and you'll share good even if it wasn't yours, right?
Right.
I love words. I think words are incredible. Book titles, like when bad things happen to good people. I just think words are awesome, right? And when you first said that, don't just do something, sit there. It's like The Pursuit of Happiness. You heard that movie, The Pursuit of Happiness?
Right.
And somebody turned around and wrote a book called The Happiness of Pursuit. And I just had this incredible feeling. I was like, oh, that's so yummy. I just love that. So when you said this the first time, don't just do something, sit there. I had that same like genius sort of feeling. So tell us about that. What do you mean, don't just do something?
So this is the pause button. This is the place where I'm aware that I'm activated. And this is not the time to do anything. This is not the time to do anything. So I am going to hit that pause button. I'm not going to just do something. I'm going to sit there. And I'm going to let my nervous system re-regulate. I'm going to let it calm down. I'm going to let it do its job, because it will always do its job if we let it. It will always come into parasympathetic deactivation. We're going to calm down. And from that place, the prefrontal cortex comes on, that cognitive brain process comes on, and now we can make a choice. And my offering to our listeners is, most of the time, that choice is going to be to do nothing. There's nothing to engage in. There's no place to go. There's nothing to correct. Anything that's being said to you that is derogatory is simply somebody else trying to dump their garbage on you, and you can take the garbage or you can leave it at their doorstep. You can take on their problem or you can leave the problem with them.
Yeah.
And when we hit that piece and we understand that there's nothing to be done here, then we go about life. And what we're trying to find in this chaos is the mainstream. We're trying to find that river of life that is right in the middle, that we're just coasting down and we're getting things done. We're going to work, we're parenting, we're playing, we're having fun, we're in relationship, we're growing together as a family, and we're not stuck in this garbage can.
This is what I love about when you talk, because I have 19 different things I want to say and I have to pick from them. That's a good sign, right? Have I talked to you about the Secret Service, the documentary I watched on Secret Service agents?
No, you didn't.
So I watched a documentary on Secret Service agents probably 10, 15 years ago. And it's like, you attend church for 10 years and you remember 3 sermons. Like, why those 3? Who knows why, right? There's certain things that stick with people and certain things that don't. I don't remember anything else from the Secret Service movie. So what, an hour and a half, 2 hours of content. I remember one thing, Brook. And that was that they said, when Secret Service agents hear gunshots, they have to stand up and get big and get in front of the person they're protecting, okay?
Right.
So naturally, because you're talking a lot about, in the beginning of what you just said, you're talking a lot about what's natural, right? Mm-hmm. When someone hears gunshots, this is an obvious question, almost rhetorical, but what's the natural thing to do? Is it get big and move into the open, or get small and hide?
It's to duck and hide.
Duck and hide, baby. And they were saying these Secret Service agents have to retrain. I don't know what part of their body. I imagine it has to do with nervous system or brain or whatever, but they have to retrain themselves to do the opposite of what the body, brain, everything, your soul tells you to do, because that's the job, to protect the president or whatever, right? Stand up and get in front of them. And you can see it. You can actually see it if you go look at the video of Reagan, the attack on Reagan, you actually see somebody do this.
Right.
We're talking about the same thing, which is like a lot of what I introduce or interject is not I'm not coming from the perspective of an expert therapist, just somebody that loves studying this stuff and saying there's hope. This is something humans have proven you're able to do. It is possible to not be addicted to doing what you want to. You can do what's right. You can retrain your body to do what is best, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the brain has so much plasticity that it can, if you over repetition, if you work this and you work this and you become aware of this, you can do it differently. It can become second nature. I know for me, this is my nature. There's nothing that comes out of my mouth, even in this conversation that we're having, that doesn't have a pre-filter to it. And it's, how is this going to land? How is this going to be heard? How is this person going to receive what it is that I have to say in a positive manner, not a negative manner? And many times when I'm in that place of discomfort, this disengagement journey is exactly what I do. I'll just stop, and there will be nothing that comes out of my mouth because there's nothing that is going to add value to the moment.
Oh my gosh, you're bringing us back to our childhood, right? Like if you don't have something nice to say, don't say nothing at all, right?
Yeah, back like to those books, everything you needed to learn for the kindergarten, right?
That's like the advanced version, you know what I mean? Right. And let's talk about neuroplasticity for a minute. You and I don't map out. We don't say like, here's the words. We're not scripted. We're having like useful conversations for a niche group of people that hopefully will benefit from what we're talking about. Let's talk about neuroplasticity because people most people want to change. Most people want to be better, or they have a habit or something that they'd love to break. And you hear, it takes 21 days, whatever. But the evidence for neuroplasticity, which if people don't know, that means you can change the physicality of your brain. Like the brain itself can be changed on purpose. This is not a theory anymore. Tell me if I'm wrong, or if there's different. But there are pictures, right? Like you have a certain way of thinking, way of acting, which means electricity is going through a certain highway of neurons or whatever, right?
Right. You've seen this in a video in my class.
Yeah, I've seen this. And isn't it true, because this is, we're in an audio format, so we can't share that video necessarily, but isn't it true that if you go to behave differently, you want to do something different than you have in the past, this little tiny, small little weed of a neuron begins to grow and grow, and you're going a different way, and it gets a little electricity from what used to be going somewhere else to the old habit. And doesn't the myelin sheath, I know this sounds crazy, but doesn't like part of the old highway like reach out and try to kill it and stop it? And that's why you have to push through for the 21 days or what? Don't you have to fight to change your brain? But if you put up the good fight, you can like become a different person over 1, 2, 3, 4 months.
Absolutely. And it continues to grow. The saying is neurons that fire together wire together. So when you're in the intensity of continually changing that pathway changes. We've got the capacity to literally rewire our belief systems and change how we see a situation. And this is part of the disengagement journey. That is moving toward and into the second and third components of the disengage.
How much hope does that bring to human beings, right? Because even though we think that the person listening to this show is probably the one without the emotional problems, who's the victim, and they're working with a difficult ex who's making everything possible, you and I both know people make mistakes, and we could have listeners that made amazing mistakes, or they see serious problems in their own like parenting styles and need to change, right? Or we might even be working with the one that does have the issue. You understand? How much more hope could a human being need than you can change your brain and be different?
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. It's you're self-creating, which is not blasphemous to say, right? Because if there is a creator, that's how they made us. on purpose, right? To be able to self-create or change. That's how cool is that? You can change your habits.
We are in charge of our own evolution. We are in charge
Whoa.
of
I haven't heard
how
it said that way. I
we
like
grow.
that.
And we have to take the time to really be in what is it that is going on here. One of the things that I really like about this disengagement conversation, and we're talking about habits, we're talking about changing how we do things, right?
Yeah.
And when I get bombarded with something from somebody that doesn't feel good, it feels like I'm being attacked, and I feel my nervous system coming up and being activated, and I'm triggered. You know what I do as I'm sitting down and doing nothing is I'm looking for what's true in what they're telling me. Where it is that this rage that's coming at me is accurate. And most times I can find a piece. It may be small, but I can find that piece. And that's the piece that I grab a hold of and I work on. And I dismiss the rest of it.
So let me just go a little bit of a different direction here besides the disengage. Let's go into what you just talked about, right? Because friends are not faithful to tell the truth. They're faithful to listen and hear and comfort you. When you really want the truth, some of the teachers, some of the other teachers I've listened to, you listen to what the enemies are saying, because most people just get judgmental and shut down, where they don't need you to like them. They're just saying it how they feel. They're just saying what they see, right?
Right.
And when a mother's children say to her as adults, "You were a terrible mother," she has two choices. She can be defensive, which is probably hear the bullets, duck behind the car, and get small. That's probably what naturally you want to do, right?
Right.
The other option is to go back in your mind and find a place where you didn't do a good job, even if it's small.
Right.
We all make mistakes, so it's probably not. But even if you can find one moment where you were a terrible mother and you respond back to that child, honey, I can see that. I agree with you. I can see the times where I was a terrible mother, and I'm so sorry. I mean, I would have been perfect if I could, and I'm doing my best now. All of a sudden, this is different than disengage, but you don't ever have to be in a fight just because somebody says something bad about you. You could just switch, you can just jump right over and be on their side.
Right.
Like, oh my God, we both hate that about me, don't we?
Right.
And what are they gonna do? It's like making it not fun, like bullies, right? Like if you stand up to the bully, or when somebody picks on you and you get all whiny about it and it's fun for them, but if you make it boring for them, they stop. It's just, for a fighter, if you don't fight anymore, they just get bored with it.
Exactly. And we're breaking the system, aren't we?
I think it's awesome. And we're talking a lot about psychologically, right? The way that people's brains work, not what you feel like doing. Yes, we all want to curse out our exes and tell them they're a piece of crap because of all the bad they did, right? But is that going to help the children? No, it's not, right?
Right.
We have a job to do. Prepare these children, give them as healthy environment as possible, prepare them and train them to be happy, healthy, successful, useful members of society by the time they leave the nest at 18, 22, or whatever it is, right?
Or 30 or 35 these days, right?
Oh, this is for the United States listeners, right? If you're 67, your child still lives at home in their 60s. Dude, if your kid's at home and getting Medicare, we got a problem. The American way, right? So you've got the disengagement journey. What happens when there's contact? Let's talk about what happens when there's contact or engagement with the other parent, because we are. What's that book? Isn't there one book out there, How to Co-Parent with a Jerk or something like that?
Right.
I mean, this is epidemic. This is not a small group of people that we're hoping can benefit from them. Having an ex who's being a booger on purpose is epidemic. So what happens when there's contact? You have to talk to these people. What do you do?
You don't. You don't have to talk to them, and that's the piece. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to engage with it. And there is so much misinformation out there around that subject. I want to step back for just a quick second, and then I'll come back into this, Charlie. But just to ring the bell of how epidemic this is, statistically, we're looking at about 500,000 people in the United States entering into a high conflict cycle scenario court case every single year. And that goes up exponentially because these people aren't getting out of this for 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 years.
This is just the United States.
That's just the United States.
And there's a few other countries in the world. I know we're arrogant, right? We think we're the only one. There are a couple other places people live besides here, right?
Right. And the way our judicial system works, the way specifically it doesn't work, the other countries, the English-speaking countries that have similar judicial systems are in the same cast.
Jeez, we're talking. I mean, it could be over 1 billion people.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
You have half the people getting divorces, and you said 70% go smooth, but half the people getting divorces and 30% are high conflict as rough numbers, right?
Right.
That's a crap load of people.
Mm-hmm. And it just keeps growing.
And you shared a statistic with me one time. What was it? Like, what percentage of people walking the earth actually have like a measurable, like, psychological disorder or mental? What was that?
Well, I think we're all absolutely crazy from the get-go, just being in the human skin. But a diagnosis.
Speak for yourself, buddy.
But from an axis to cluster B, and you guys can look this up in the DSM as to what that means. There's about 5 or 6 categories that this falls under, and this specific types of personalities that we find in high conflict predominantly. This doesn't have to do with mood disorders. This doesn't have to do with other types of psychological things. Just this particular piece that we're talking about. Statistically is a little over 20, about 21% of the people walking the streets of this country fall into one of these categories. 1 in 5. And that is scary. And we see them every day and we don't notice them until we are in relationship with them and there's stress that is applied to that relationship.
I mean, you don't know a chair's broken until you apply weight to it and it doesn't hold it. Same idea, right? Until there's, like, when everybody's hunky-dory, fine, right? But when the relationship gets tested,
right?
And I mean, this is my observation. I don't know if it's true out there, but just from the very few divorces I've seen, is there some sort of traditional response when you're the person who was left? Meaning, I left my ex, I know someone else who left their ex, I know someone else who left their ex, and the 3 rejected parties reacted almost exactly the same way. Is there some natural psychological response to rejection in these deep relationships where there's a similarity in how they fight back?
There is, Charlie, and you're getting ahead into one of our next podcasts in 2 or 3 more weeks.
Oh, perfect. Nice. Love it.
So
okay.
We'll just leave that seated for a little bit, but absolutely.
Okay. Little teaser for things to come, huh? Perfect. So what else do you want to say about disengage? I mean, you came back and said something. I wrote it down because I liked it so much. I said, you have to talk to these people. And what I meant was, like, you've got kids, you've got to co-parent, you have to do something. You have to be in relationship with them because of the child. And you said, no, you don't. So let's talk more about that. How do you disengage from someone that you have children under 18 and shared time?
So let's be really clear about what needs to be talked about with the kids, or about with the other parent, and it is the kids. The kids are the only centerpiece of any exchange of communication that has to happen. Communication, to me, is an exchange of information, especially when we're in conflict. So you need to know something, or I need to know something. I don't need to know what you think of me. I don't need to know your opinion about something over here. I don't need to hear what you think about my parenting. And I certainly don't need to enter into that argument with you. That is going to take me nowhere, and it's going to get nothing done. But Johnny does need to get to the doctor. And I need to get him there, and I'm going to acknowledge that I understand that that's when it's got to happen, and it'll happen. Johnny has medicine from that doctor's appointment, and you need to know where the medicine is, where to get the medicine, and what the doctor said about that. So I need to put that in an email, and that needs to get to you. Johnny has a problem at school, and we have to go to school and talk to the teacher, and we have to figure out what's going on. That's a conversation that we have, and we have to figure out what the psychologist is and how we're going to get that piece accomplished. And that can be difficult, but that's a place that we have to have a conversation. Short of those things, there's really no communication that has to happen. And anything that we engage in the communication beyond these specific types of things that involve the children's needs is going to end up in this negative feedback loop that's got a positive feedback loop that's got a negative outcome to it. And I don't want to go there. I don't need to go there. My system doesn't demand that I go there, so I'm not going to go there. And if the other person gets their nose bent out of shape about that, that's the problem. It's not mine. So to your point, or rather to my point, is no, you don't have to do it. So don't. And that's part of the disengagement. See, the next piece here, Charlie, and I'm gonna run with this for a minute. That next level of the disengagement, that second disengagement, is an acceptance that this person is unchangeable. They're not going to be anybody but who they are, unless by some act of God that they wake up and decide to change. I'm not going to change them. What I have to tell them is not going to change them. And they are who they are. They've shown me who they are. And if I can accept that, then I don't have to go there. It's when I am out of acceptance of that I go to engagement, because I want to fix it. I want to change it. I want it to be different for my children. I want this to change. And I have to come into acceptance that that isn't going to happen. And that allows me to take that next level of disengagement.
Can I give you one of my favorite quotes of the last year from the books that I read?
Sure.
You could spend your entire life trying to teach a cat to bark, and at the end it will look at you and say, meow. And if you really want more peace, how do you know that a cat shouldn't bark? Because it doesn't. Reality is faithful, and fighting reality will only hurt you. So if you're with if your ex meows and you wish they barked, or let's just say it that way, right? You wish they acted differently than they do. Any thoughts or efforts that say they shouldn't be that way, or they should be different, or I want them or hope that they change, can only hurt you and hurt your kids. That's not where to focus.
That's right.
Fair enough?
Absolutely. And again, it's back to, that's not where to focus. Let me focus on my home. Let me focus on my parenting. Let me focus on what I can do and how I can evolve.
And isn't one's life, basically the quality of one's life, isn't it the sum of the decisions we make of what to focus on, the meaning we associate to those things, and where we place our thoughts and our time? That's how you create a life, isn't it?
Right.
Imagine a life lived focusing on someone else and wishing they were different than they were. I mean, if I go stand and stare at a giraffe for the rest of my life and wish it was shorter and curse at it because it's so tall, and then I do that for 100 years, what kind of a life did I live?
You didn't.
It's silliness, right?
And we're back to getting into the mainstream. Our focus is where we want to be, in the mainstream of our life.
And we didn't teach that neuroplasticity is the reality that you can change the structure of someone else's brain by nagging. That's a different teaching, right?
That's right. That's how we get.
This is about your brain, right? Like, you can be different and think differently, right?
Correct.
That's awesome. All right, negative intimacy. This is something that I've thought a lot about. I've learned a lot from you about. But what is, that's a weird term, right? Negative intimacy. What is this?
So negative intimacy is this idea, and again, this really kind of comes back into that next podcast, but I'll seed this a little bit more here as well. Negative intimacy is this idea that I can stay with you. You are not gone. You have not abandoned me. I have not been rejected because I got you by the throat because we are in conflict and you aren't going anywhere. I got you. So it's this idea of keeping that rejection from being complete. You can't go away. You can't get away. And when we get into that piece, we're going to really
so we're going to dig on that.
We're going to drop into that.
Okay.
I want to finish the disengagement conversation before we jump off and go into another tangent here for a minute, Charlie, because I think the third piece is the finale. It's the beauty at the end of this journey. If we can get to this third level of disengagement, it's a spiritual component, and it is that place of approval. Remember, we're at awareness, acceptance, and approval, and where we can come into a relationship within ourselves, not with the other person, because we're never going to get there. This is disengagement, remember?
Mm-hmm.
But this is this place internally where we can look at the beauty and the sorrow that is being experienced by this other parent in their distress. That understanding that they're not that different from us. They're just trying to figure out a problem in a way that makes them feel better, and they don't know how to do it, and they're stuck in this body, in this nervous system that will never downregulate, that they are always in distress, and they're trying to find a way out of it, and they don't know how. They're like a child. And if we look at their behavior, this is very childish behavior. This is, and I don't mean that in a derogatory fashion. I mean that the development in their nervous system got stuck, and they don't have the capacity and the ability to change that. And I mean that literally. Their development in their nervous system has been inhibited by their experience as a child in their development, and they can't move past it. They're not like people that can have self-reflection and go, oh, I did that. I could have done a better job. Let me work on that. It's no, you did this to me. It's a victim component. It's this place of not being able to get out of that mode. And this is all that they can do. And to really be able to look at them and go, man, I get it. I understand that this is a horrific thing for you. And I'm sorry that you have to walk this alone. I can't help you with it. But what I can do is I can take care of myself. I can take care of our children in the best way that I can. And I can hope that something comes along at some moment that helps you relieve that distress in your being.
So let me do some layman's terms, Cliff Notes. Okay.
Sure.
One of my other favorite quotes for the year, it made me cry, was, "We are all just doing our best."
Absolutely.
And it doesn't sound profound, right? But the profundity, if you take that to its like all the ways you could apply that, I mean, it's the answer for depression for some people. To be angry at someone, right? To be upset by someone's behavior, whether you do it consciously or subconsciously, you have to think in your mind, they actually had the ability to do it differently. They could have done it better. And they chose consciously to not. They could have and they should have, right?
Right.
I mean, the cat should have barked and it didn't. It meowed, right? So to be angry at this X person, and I'm going to say in layman's terms, maybe see them as sick instead of seeing them as a jerk, right? Because you were just saying their system doesn't downregulate. They've got a condition that you probably don't have. So not being in their shoes, you really can't judge them and say, well, I wish they'd act differently. You never even felt what they feel, right? So, Brooke, whether it's true or not, we're talking about the health of the individual. It only takes one person to be a great parent for the kids and make it. Let's let that person be the listener, right? For the listener's own psychological well-being, choose to see this totally frustrating person who acts differently than you, who's your co-parent, as sick, not as a jerk who consciously knows what to do and has the ability and just chooses the wrong thing every time. If you can see everybody as we're all just doing the best we can, everybody at every moment with the tools they have, the pain they have, the limitations, makes the best possible choice. Life is happening to you, or life is happening for you, not to you, right? If you could see it in that positivity and see that person, okay, you had a child with someone who's got some mental illnesses, right? Or whether they be like temporary from like post-traumatic stress disorder, they're going to get through it, or whether they have like a physical something biologically different in their brain that's never going to change. You had a child with someone who's sick. Switching from that to say they're not sick, they're exactly like me, they're just a total jerk.
Right.
The only thing that's going to do is keep you amped and keep your system triggering and firing where you can't make smart decisions and create a bunch of stress that makes you like fat and sick and kills you.
Right. And we can even take that to even a different component within that same conversation, Charlie. And it's like, we're not all astrophysicists. And an astrophysicist can look at us and go, well, why can't you see that? And we're just not wired to see it. It's just not in there. We don't all have the capacity to process in the same manners. And even if the frustration is coming out of somebody that is not handicapped in the way that we're talking about, they just have a different way of thinking, or they have a different perspective of how they come at this. And they're going to arrive at a shift only when they're ready to explore that shift. And we can't push them in that direction.
And
only they can.
Whose business is that when it happens? Yours, the other person's, or God's?
It's their responsibility.
It's at least them or God. It's not you, right?
Yeah, it's their journey. It's their journey. It's certainly not mine. And every time I come into this internal conversation in my world, it's like, just shut up, because you got so much stuff that you got to work on, and you don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the journey of the disengagement. I mean, it really comes from this blob of just hanging on and trying to figure it out into really almost a spiritual awakening to, we're just all doing this the best that we can. Brene Brown, in her book Rising Strong, really states this really well, as how we all come through our traumas and our experience in life, and that are working through that. Each one of us is just doing the best that we can.
It's such a better way to see the world. It really is. I mean, let me wrap up with a question for you, a little bit of a conversation, and then I'm going to ask you for one practical example for how someone can apply this right away.
Sure.
Whether they're a sponsor, whether we do a show where we interview these folks, whether it's just something we bring up, who knows how they're going to be involved, but we will at some point, somehow, introduce people to software where they can keep track of all of their conversations, all of the family calendar, the parenting schedule, the medicines, the doctor's information, the finances that need to be tracked. We're going to introduce people to some tools to take a lot of this unnecessary stress off their laps. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. As a matter of fact, Charlie, just yesterday I was in a conversation with the people over at my favorite one, which is our Family Wizard. And Jai Kasoon, who is one of the founders of the company, is going to join us in a podcast here in the next weeks. And as soon as we can figure out a time, and he's going to come in and he's going to talk to us about this very subject.
Okay, so no question about it. We're going to make sure people know about our Family Wizard. Now, I think, I hadn't even thought of this. It's our first show, but maybe we should do this every show. That's fine. What can someone do? How could somebody apply disengage? Maybe use one example of receiving a text or an email or whatever. What's one example of how this could be applied for someone between this week and next week's show? How could somebody use this information right away?
So the next time that the other parent reaches out to you, and in their own urgency, they want you to respond to whatever it is that they want you to respond to. And there's nothing in that that has anything to do with your children. That it is mostly an attack on you, and there's this sense of urgency that you have to defend yourself. Don't, and see what happens.
Just don't respond.
Don't respond. And we'll actually open next week with that piece. I'm going to suggest at that time what I feel probably happened. You can match that up, see if I'm correct. And then, again, everything that we're going to talk about is built on this.
I think this is accurate. If you know differently, you can correct me. If a listener knows differently, you can correct me. But I believe that Jerry Rice, football receiver, played for decades, had very few injuries. Have you ever heard anybody talk about why he didn't have a lot of injuries?
Because he always trained.
He always trained. And he just let it happen. He just relaxed and did nothing. So instead of, like, when people hit him in midair, his whole body was like floppy, you know what I mean? Instead of like being scared or being worried. And it sounds like, it's not a perfect analogy, but it sounds like you're just saying, don't just do something. Sit there. If the other person is spazzing out, you're not in a relationship anymore, so it's not your responsibility. Whose problem is it? It's theirs, right? And you used to respond. Just don't do anything. Do absolutely nothing and let the world take its course and see what happens.
Right. And I would just add something else to that as we depart. This isn't just about somebody that you're not in relationship with anymore. This translates into every relationship that you have everywhere in your world.
You don't have to respond.
Right.
Disengage. All right, folks. We'll be back next Friday morning with another episode. For now, this is Brook Olson, Charlie Jewett signing off from episode number 1. It's rolling, baby. It's rolling, Brook.
Thanks, Charlie.
The High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast. Listen in. I would think if people listen for 1 or 2 months, what kind of changes do you think they'll have inside or just in their lives in general?
If they listen to this stuff and they really decide that they want to engage with this stuff, it's life-changing. It will change every aspect of everything that they do.
Awesome. One of my favorite things you said today, we are in charge of our own evolution. Bye for now. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. Brook, people don't have to wait until Friday mornings to get more content. If this is something that's helpful for them, right? This isn't the first time you've broadcast anything or recorded anything or put anything out there in the world. What are the other ways people can get the help more aggressively or speed up their recovery process? What materials are available for people right now?
Well, I've written a book called The Black Hole of High Conflict, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle.
Great.
And everything that we're talking about is really compressed and put into there. So this is a really good starter place to get in and get your mind working and to see what these concepts are about and how to start to apply them. The other place that I think that is valuable is to go to our website and look at some of the blog articles that I've written. Those are available there as well. They go into some of these other arenas, and that's at www.highconflict.net. So the book, the website are also really good places to get the material. And also we have classes. We have high conflict diversion program classes that you can get into and get some one-on-one help with this as well.
And you know me, I'm aggressive. Whatever I want to become good at or learn, I find someone who's good at it and pay them and hire them and shorten my learning curve. What if somebody just wants your help? Somebody says, Brook has this information. He's good at something I'm not good at yet, and I want to work with him. Do you have any type of coaching or consultations or anything like that?
Absolutely. I do one-on-one coaching for custody cases. I help people get ready for family court services. If you've got that in your community, I work with attorneys and clients to help them with managing and strategically setting them up to have more successful cases as well.
And how do they reach out? You want them to just go to the website or email or phone, or what's the best way for them to reach out, raise their hand, and say, I need some help?
They can email me. My direct email is brook@highconflict.net. That's BROOK at highconflict, HIGH, conflict.net.
Perfect. That's everything everybody would need to get some help, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brook.
Thank you, Charlie.